Okay.
We'll just present it. Philosophical one word.
Yay!
Like it looks nice. Get it, Victor?
Okay, so our group was the philosophical approach to Frankenstein.
Okay, and so for philosophy, we're going to be taking a greater look at alchemy and the role of natural sciences in the novel and how that like kind of impacts the morality of Victor Frankenstein's character and all that jazz. So with alchemy, that incorporates numerology, astrology, and sometimes even theology to kind of understand the essences of the natural and gracious world. The greatest goals were to produce the elixir of life, the philosopher's stone, and to like give animation to the inanimate. In greater context, in greater context to the novel, alchemy was kind of the godfather to like many more natural sciences. In the beginning, Victor, when he was still very innocent and very curious about learning, he referenced alchemists like Paracelsus, Magnus, and Agrippa. And these alchemists were the ones that kind of marked the transition from a more mystic science to a more professional science that was like based more on fact rather than like the cosmos. And a quote we have is also in the beginning of the novel by Frankenstein. I entered with the greatest diligence into the search of the philosopher's stone and the elixir of life, but the latter soon obtained my undivided attention. Wealth was an inferior object, but what glory would attend the discovery if I could banish disease from the human frame and render my man invulnerable to any but a violent death. So it's at this point Victor's focus is more on alchemy rather than like the wealth that can be associated with succeeding in prolonging life. But it marks more of a transition into natural philosophy because he's not looking for that cure-all, that elixir. He's just looking to prolong life and to like more and to provide more animation in and so that kind of moves into natural philosophy. So the purpose of natural philosophy, as I previously mentioned, is not to like tie everything in with like the cosmos and astrology. It's definitely not devoid of that sect, but it has a greater focus on fact and understanding like the inner workings of Earth. So with metaphysicality versus religion, Frankenstein, he fills his soul with alchemy, and what Shelley is doing by characterizing Frankenstein in this way is she's kind of suggesting that this history is like evolving into like more like factual like ideologies that'll like become like more excessively inward facing or earthbound, and that kind of like begs the question of whether or not this was all moral.
So another part of the philosophy approach is talking about morality and ethics. And the first part of this is how Frankenstein really plays God with his creation. It's like he doesn't really just want a creation. He actually goes in saying stuff like, I want it to look at me like I'm a god, I'm its creator, I want to be looked at with this sort of new vision, like I'm your god, pretty much. And when he does that, there's kind of this license you take off the theme of like knowledge and suffering. You create this being that knows that it's just a lesser being and not capable of as nearly as much as its creator is. And its awareness of that makes it feel like terrible. So there's like some moral gap there. Along with that, there's this idea of epistemology, which is a long name for a philosophy that deals with, the inner workings and theory of knowledge as a whole. And underneath that, one of the founding principles is called moral sense theory. And that pretty much says that anything is able to make its own moral decisions without the intervention of a divine source. With that in mind, it really is just the creation, the monster, the creature. He makes his own decisions. He actually at one point says like, pretty much, I'm not going to eat people, and I know that's right, but nobody had to tell me that. So that's just like one ethical, moral compass idea. And then after that, there is deontological ethics and justice-based ethics, and they're kind of contrasted with egoism, which is another kind of ethics. Deontological ethics is really, it means like duty or responsibility-based ethics. So the person that really applies to is Frankenstein. He feels obligated to contribute to society as a whole, increase the amount of knowledge available to people. And that's really his big picture, like I want to help people sort of ethics. And the justice-based ethics is actually attributed to the creature, because he wants to receive justice for, you know, his terrible life and all that on his creator. And these are both really holistic, 30,000 feet sort of views on ethics, and they're positive. Now, there's a duality to this because they both also have egoism, which is an egocentric, you know, self-centered sort of ethical code. So it's like for self-advancement, pretty much Frankenstein wants recognition for his accomplishments, and because of that, he doesn't really think in the long run. He just thinks, I'm going to make a creature, doesn't really care about the consequences of that. And the creature, his original egoism is like, I just want to be happy. And then later, it's kind of goes from I want justice to I want revenge. So there's this sort of contrast between them both having these conflicting, I want to help everybody and do what's right for the whole, and I want to do what's right for me sort of ideas.
Two major questions that are explored in the book from a philosopher's standpoint are what it means to be a human, and should Frankenstein accept responsibility for his creature's action. The first question, what does it mean to be a human? It is very evident throughout the course of the book that Frankenstein does not view his creation as a human. And but from philosophy's standpoint, the creature is by all rights a human being, capable of complex emotions and thoughts, and is self-aware. The real reason that Frankenstein can't view his creation as a human being is simply because he can't get past his grotesque appearance, and that he created him. So, the second question being, should Frankenstein accept responsibility for his creature's actions? Throughout the course of the book, again, it is plainly obvious that he does not accept responsibility whatsoever. As seen in chapter 9, when Frankenstein says, when I reflected on his crimes and malice, my hatred and revenge burst all bounds of moderation. And if he had accepted responsibility, he would have said something more along the lines of, I'm sorry for what my creature has done, and I'm going to right his wrongs. Instead, he focuses more on just revenge for all the crimes that the monster has done to him. This goes into the law of unintentional consequences. He didn't mean for this to happen, but he should have accounted for it, because anything can happen. Victor Frankenstein took neither moral responsibility nor just normal responsibility, whereas he should have taken both, because he did create the monster.
And so to kind of bring it back to the 20th and the 21st century, this can be seen as the book Frankenstein and Victor Frankenstein's creation of the monster can be seen as the first example of synthetic biology, which is the engineering of the cell of existing organisms. And I'm going to talk more about a specific example on the next slide. But this man, J. Craig Venter, and his team, they're currently working to transplant genomes into host cells that have been removed to create a new creature. So it's a similar idea that Victor Frankenstein already did with Frankenstein, and you can see the parallel and duality between something that Aaron brought up with Frankenstein, and that in the modern day creation that they're both playing God. They're taking life into their own hands, and they are making it so that they have all of the power and all of the control over this creature or new organism. So a good modern day example would be Dolly the sheep, probably the most famous example of cloning so far. So Dolly the sheep is the first mammal to ever be cloned, and that happened in 1996. And it happened in Scotland after 227 attempts. So it's really interesting to see that in the modern day, when it actually tries to be implemented, it takes 227 attempts, but in the book, it takes him like 2 or 3. It happens really easy for him with a really complex person who ends up having all these emotions and really advanced thoughts after really not learning anything and becoming really self-educated. And also this can show, in modern day, Dolly could mate and reproduce the normal way, in the traditional way, without having to be cloned again. So that can show that if Victor Frankenstein actually did create the other monster that the creature wanted him to create, the female companion, that in theory the cycle could have kept going, and it could have just gotten worse. There could have been more and more monsters, which was eventually Victor realized that's probably not a very smart idea. So for the future of cloning all of these animals, look at the little babies. Not possible yet, but all of these animals have already been cloned, and currently it's available for $100,000. But it's not available for humans yet. So that can just show that there are all of these different ways that you can take this old concept of an idea of becoming God and really placing it into modern day example. And actually, most cloning happens with taking the genomes and the cells of other organisms and implanting them. And then it also actually does this therapy actually does use electricity, which is really interesting because that's kind of like the whole big thing of the theory of how Frankenstein created the monster, even though he tells Walton, I'm never going to tell you because I don't want it to happen again. It's really interesting that you can see the duality because Mary Shelley wrote this so many years ago, but it's actually all becoming very logical and very true because back when she wrote the novel, science really wasn't that big of an idea. It was mainly all based on religion and thoughts and these really abstract ideas. But now it's painfully obvious that these abstract ideas can actually be proven with science. And that's our bibliography.